Hello, and welcome to a new type of video. Long story short, I turned 26, got kicked off of my dad's health insurance, and decided I needed to get a real job. In many ways, I do consider YouTube a real job. It's just that with my size of channel, the income is too unreliable to like budget or do what I need to do. So I went looking for something part-time that I could still work on YouTube on the side of, which led me to becoming an aide at the elementary school that my sister teaches at. Specifically, so far I've been working in kindergarten with the little cuties and I'm enjoying it, but rest assured I have no intentions to stop posting on YouTube. It's just led me to start considering different kinds of videos that I could maybe more easily integrate into a lifestyle with a real job in it. And by far the most time-consuming part of my video making process is the scripting part. Like, video editing can be tedious in its own way, but it's also very straightforward to me. Like, as long as I'm allotting the amount of time I need to do it, I can just get it done. Scripting, writing, it's not like that for me. I love it, but it's a labor of love, and it's very hard for me to predict how long I will take to write something, which is why my upload schedule has been non-existent. And I have no intention to stop writing in general or stop working on YouTube scripts in particular. But I do wonder if now scripted videos have to be fewer and farther between, and I wanted to find video ideas that I was really passionate about doing in an unscripted format, which led me to reflecting on my whole videography. And one of my favorite things to do on YouTube has been deep diving into specific subsections of media. So like reading every Nicholas Sparks book or watching every Scooby-Doo movie. Most of the time this ends up being a ranking video. Sometimes it's just been more of a scripted review of everything I read or watched for that project. And it occurred to me that I could do something similar in a more vlog style format. So I have spent the last 2-ish months trying just that. The specific collection of art I have decided to deep dive this time is the top 10 romance novels of 2024 as voted by Goodreads users. So Goodreads, maybe you've heard of it, does this thing called the Goodreads Choice Awards where people vote for their favorite books. I've actually never voted, so I don't even know how the voting system works. But then they sort them by genres and rank the top vote getters of each category. I know that a lot of people are abandoning the Goodreads ship to try out other apps which aren't owned by Amazon, and I respect that. Maybe I'll do it myself sometime, but for the purposes of this video, Goodreads is still the most popular app. So in terms of gauging the popularity of certain books, I think it is the best metric for that. And my personal motive in wanting to catch up on popular romance books was that I was feeling kind of not well read. That's probably because one of my New Year's resolutions for 2024 was to branch out of the romance genre, particularly by reading more nonfiction. I did technically accomplish that, not necessarily to the extent that I would have liked to, but I read, I think, 3 or 4 nonfiction books, and I'd still like to further expand my horizons in that way. I still have a long list of nonfiction recommendations I wrote down, but having put so much pressure on myself to mostly read nonfiction last year sort of put me in a reading slump. So I wanted to start off this year by getting back to my roots. I know what I want, and that's to read about people smooching and falling in love. I went with just the standard romance rankings. There is actually a separate category for romantasy, which I'm not sure has existed before, because in the world of romance, romantasy is kind of what's in, but it's less my vibe. I would rather read a standard fantasy series with a strong romantic subplot than something that is billed as romantasy that's supposed to be half and half. And I'm not sure why. That's just how I feel. And I've always really liked your standard contemporary romance. So anyway, I guess you'll have to keep watching to find out what I think of any particular book in the top 10. I loved some and did not love others. But it's safe to say I did, in a technical sense, get myself out of a reading slump because I have been reading. I should warn you though, when I started working on this video, I was about a month out from having COVID for the first time, and I thought I was pretty much over it, but having now started editing my first bits of footage, I sound terrible. So the next you see me, I don't know if you'll think I sound terrible, maybe you don't know my voice that well, but I think I sound terrible. Until the next clip. Just taking a look here, I decided which one I would read first. I decided to draw the line at 10, both because that's a clean, easy number to draw the line at, and because there's a pretty steep drop off in votes here, so this is the 10th one, and I could start there and work my way up, but I'm immediately drawn to this one, King of Sloth, because I saw that title and I had no idea. I was picturing the animal, the sloth the animal, and like a king of that. Which would be an iconic romance novel. It's actually a part of this series by Anna Huang, where the idea is that every entry is based on a deadly sin, which all makes it make more sense, though it is kind of funny to me that when I decided to make this video, the one that was released this year, the one that's ranked this year, is the sloth one, because like a lot of the 7 deadly sins have a certain mystique to them that makes them interesting for this premise. Like, she hasn't released King of Lust yet, but like sounds interesting. King of Envy, like, ooh, what does all of that mean? I'm gonna read King of Sloth, so the lazy one, and I'm just very interested in how that will be pulled off. That's the thought process. So I downloaded the audiobook, and as I get ready for work tomorrow, walk my dog, and on my commute home, I'm gonna listen to King of Sloth, and we'll see. Hey, want to remove my makeup with me and talk about my first impressions of King of Sloth? I'm like breaking out right now, but I did a fun green eyeliner for red and green day of Christmas Spirit Week. Anyway, the main characters of King of Sloth are Sloane and what's his face, Javier, and she is his like PR person because he's like the heir to a fortune. Apparently this whole King of 7 Deadly Sins series is like about billionaires, and that's sort of the issue, is now that you know he's a billionaire, it makes a lot of sense how she's able to romanticize the sin of sloth. It's like this rich guy who doesn't want to take over the family business and is more interested in partying and vacationing. So I'm trying to hold him to the same standards as I would hold anybody else, but he is like a nepo baby and he is super rich, so I guess he is allowed to be lazy, because that's the other thing, is I don't feel so far like he is supposed to get better about his laziness, his slothiness, because he kind of seems more like he's being a good influence on the female lead, who is like a workaholic. But also there have been a few hints that he's going to become some sort of like club manager or like party planner, because every party he goes to, he has this inner monologue that's like, oh, they need to do something different with the lights and the vibe in here is all wrong. So that's sort of where I see it going. I think he won't take over the family business, but he will start, you know, some sort of club business. And about the female lead, I immediately thought, based on the way her job was being described, that she was his bodyguard, because she kept saying her job, like in the first chapter, she kept saying her job was to look after him. So I didn't realize she was his PR person, his publicist, until that was explicitly stated, because I feel like that's not what the job of a publicist is, to babysit. In the first chapter, she's like getting him out of bed. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that what publicists do? Or do you have like meetings? Something I like, and this is more about formatting than it is about the content of the book. This audiobook has 2 narrators, one for Sloane and one for Javier, and they'll come into each other's chapters to do their own dialogue, which is nice. Another interesting tidbit is that Sloane has a half-sister who has like a chronic fatigue condition. I'm trying to decide if that is like thematically part of the idea of sloth as the sin that represents this book, and therefore then how I'd feel about that, because if you have, you know, a chronic condition, this is aloe, I put aloe on my face all the time and I swear by it, but if you have a chronic condition, I wouldn't consider it sinful to be like fatigued or not active. And I don't think the book is implying otherwise. It's just strange that this condition is mentioned in the sloth book, and I'm like putting 2 and 2 together, and I'm having questions and comments and concerns about that. But I guess I'll keep you updated. Now I have to do some training modules for my new job. Okay, so the story today is that it was Christmas character day at school, so I'm Rudolph. the red-nosed reindeer. I'm getting on the bus like this, so I'm gonna listen to King of Sloth. I have about an hour and a half left. I'll be finishing it as Rudolph on the bus. Rudolph should guide the bus. Where we left off, I believe I was like a quarter of the way through, and at that point the leads had been on vacation throughout the majority of the book, and I kind of thought that's what it was going to be, like the story of them on this vacation. But like right after I last updated you at that 25% mark, the book changes a lot because his dad, the like rich billionaire guy, dies, and so the rest of the book is about whether or not the male lead will get his inheritance. And Sloan is on the committee that votes whether or not he will get his inheritance. So like in the meantime, to prove that he can operate a business, he's starting a club. So I was right with my prediction that the reason that every time they went to a bar or somewhere along those lines, he would start critiquing the atmosphere. I was right that that was a hint. And on the romance end of things, Sloan and Javier just sort of realize that they're into each other and decide that they will date for a trial period and then like see how they feel after that, which is weird because it's like, why the trial period? Like that's just dating. You date for a time until it becomes like official or it ends. That's what dating is. It's a trial period. And I wasn't like not into it. I think that in the grand scheme of things, I'd give this book a 3 out of 5 stars because it is in every way I can think of competent. Like I can see what it's doing. Javier has this clear arc of being like a party guy, heir to a fortune who like learns to like enjoy his business and become more productive. And in classic romance fashion, Sloan has the opposite arc. So she's learning to loosen up a little, party a little, and not just work all the time. The chemistry was fine. The book was fine. I think it's just that these particular characters and this particular scenario didn't like speak to me or like appeal to me. Specifically because these books are about billionaires, I'd be interested in King of Greed. I'd be interested in King of Wrath. Like there are just personality traits that are more interesting to me than Sloth, even though I think that she pulled it off with Javier like surprisingly well. There's just a very distinct and particular reason why I knocked it down a star, and what I actually gave it on Goodreads was 2 out of 5. And that reason is because of a sex scene which, how do I like phrase this without saying it? Involves a shoe. And it upset me, like viscerally it upset me. Cause like generally I appreciate when a sex scene is creative. A lot of smut is very samey, but like shoes would rank in the top 5 least sanitary items I can think of. Like next you'll tell me they were using a toilet brush. The way they used a shoe was unspeakable and not cool with me. But those are basically my thoughts on that book, and we will be moving onward. I actually don't know which of the top 10 I'll pick up next. I mean, I did buy one of them, Wild Love by Elsie Silver, yesterday, mostly because I would like to read the physical copy of at least one of these books. And I thought this one had the cutest cover, so if I'm going to put one on my shelf, it might as well be this one. This is a cute cover, right? But right now it is the weekend before Christmas, so I've got cleaning and wrapping and stuff to do that I think an audiobook would be good for, so I might choose something else to come next, though I'll still try to keep it seasonal. I mean, there are a lot of summer books on this list, and I'm making my peace with reading those in the winter, but I'd at least like to wait until after Christmas to get into those. But for now, I'm gonna take my hair out because this hairstyle is hurting me. I just finished listening to the prologue of Bride by Hazelwood, which is what I decided to read next or listen to next, mainly because it's the only one that appears to be a paranormal romance, and it just, the cover gave a more wintry vibe to me. I don't know why seasonal reading is such a priority for me, but that's my truth. The point is that hardly into it at all, just having read the prologue, I do not like Bride by Hazelwood so far, and I'm afraid that I have to listen to the whole thing because I went into it like, ooh, a paranormal romance vibe. Like, it's been a while since I've read something like that. Sounds fun. But to me, the paranormal romance vibe is darker and drearier and more mysterious, but this protagonist is immediately coming off like a contemporary, like quirky workplace romance girl, and I do think that's what the other books Ali Hazelwood has written are like. She's like a vampire named Misery, and she's in an arranged marriage with a werewolf for like political reasons or something. I've only read the prologue. I don't really know what it's all about yet. But like during this wedding ceremony to a werewolf she doesn't want to marry in this like super dramatic scenario, this girl is like making these quirky little jokes. And I think part of it is that I am listening to the audiobook. So the narrator is interpreting everything in a very quirky voice that is just like so not the vibe I was expecting this morning. I bought this audiobook for $16 or something, and now I just have to listen to the whole thing because it's also part of this project, and I just don't want to. I already don't like it, but I'll try to get over it. I'll try to get over it because it would be more fun if I liked it. I finished the first chapter on my walk, and now I'm even more upset because I've found things to like, but the main character's like general personality is still so annoying to me, and it's ruining the stuff that I do like. So obviously I'm still only a chapter in, and we'll see how this goes, but I'm really enjoying the vampire and werewolf lore so far. So in this universe, the creatures are just humans, werewolves, and vampires, as far as I know. And either all humans or just select humans know about supernatural creatures, so humans are also involved in these like treaties between these groups. And something they do to keep the peace is have children of like higher ups in one of the species communities raised by another species, so that if things go awry they will be like killed. And the main character was that growing up. Her father is like a higher up in vampire society, and she was collateral for the vampires. So she was raised among humans, and that's why she's more human-y. But being human-y doesn't really excuse for the fact that she's just so obnoxious. And I still don't know if it's just the writing or if it's also the way the narrator is interpreting the writing. So I'm going to find a few examples from the audiobook to show you right now as evidence so you understand. This is as she is walking down the aisle to her werewolf husband, who is apparently extremely dangerous. This is the internal monologue and dialogue. It starts with dialogue from her father, I think.
Father whispers, lips barely moving. He is very dangerous. Do not cross him. What every girl wants to hear 10 feet from the altar.
What every girl wants to hear. Does that annoy you too? Am I crazy? This one is still as she is walking down the aisle. Another little quip from our narrator.
I wonder what the best man is whispering in his ear. Maybe a mirror copy of the warnings I got. Misery Lark. No need to be careful. She's not particularly dangerous, so feel free to cross her. What is she gonna do? Chuck her lint roller at you? I snort out a soft laugh.
Am I wrong? I mean, it's just so annoying. And I can imagine this writing style in like a contemporary workplace romance. It's just so not the vibe for this vampire werewolf wedding right now. Am I wrong? I'm gonna find more. I need you to understand me. Take a listen to the last line of chapter 1.
Because, yeah, I guess I'm getting married.
Because, yeah. I can't do this. I can't read this book or listen to it. I think maybe it would be better. Why did I lay down? I think maybe it would be better if I was just reading this one myself. But do you hear how the narrator is interpreting it? I hate it so far because I hate this character so much. We'll see. I've decided to talk about Bride by Ali Hazelwood before I leave for my family's Christmas Eve party because I finished it all that first day, but things have gotten busy after that, so I haven't had a moment to sit down, and I'm gonna forget what I thought and what happened in it. I fear I've already forgotten the alpha werewolf's first name. I think it starts with an L. I think it's Lon or Lou. I could look this up, but I'm choosing not to. So yes, despite the fact that I was not enjoying it right away, I did finish it all in one listen because I had tons of stuff to do. I got all of my Christmas wrapping done, and I admittedly increased the speed to 2.5 times. Normally I'm always at 2, but I was like, let's get this over with. And you know what? Once I got used to the general tone, to the personality of the protagonist, it wasn't so bad. It was simply still not my vibe and not what I expected. So I haven't read any other Ali Hazelwood. I just know of those other books, and I know them to be about people falling in love like at their workplace or in college or things along those lines. And this book from her appears to me like a really creative swing, but I don't know, and I literally don't know because I haven't read these other books. I don't know if she altered her writing style enough to accompany this huge genre shift. And I just can't have a character in these circumstances joking to me like they are a rom-com like journalist. You know what I mean? Like, I found the humor itself, even if I were reading a different kind of story, kind of cringy. Like, it just wasn't that funny to me. But even if the humor like was good on its own, I just don't think I like the juxtaposition. It's a mismatch to me. Though I will say that's just the style of the book. So whether or not I was into that doesn't really speak to how well it pulled off what it was trying to accomplish. And what was it trying to accomplish? I don't know. Like I did mention that initially I was really enjoying the lore of it all, but after that introductory chapter where you learn about the basics of this world, I didn't think the lore was all that in depth. The main thing you learn is that it's possible for the species to procreate and to have like half humans, half werewolves, perhaps vampire werewolves, which would be good for our main characters, I guess, because that's they're a vampire and a werewolf and they get busy. And that's the other thing, is once you really get into the romance of this book, it is not about their compatibility as characters. It is very smutty and very entrenched in the world of like ABO, which I have never really ventured into before, and it's not my vibe. It's not my vibe. Even though this is coming from an author who doesn't traditionally write in this zone, it felt like it expected me to know things about ABO lore or werewolf lore that I didn't know. So like they were doing this thing called nodding, which I've like vaguely heard of, but I don't really get it and I don't really want to get it. And then the book, like they start doing it, but it's like only alluded to in a way where I'm like, I still don't know what's going on. I still don't know, and I don't want to know, so it's okay. Anyway, beyond the smut, it's just about like their biological pull to each other romantically because they are mates, right? So you don't get what I like out of a romance, which is that compatibility angle of learning what makes characters good for each other and how they improve each other and why they come together. It's just like magnetic fate stuff. I don't know. I wasn't vibing with it. There was actually a chance in my mind that they wouldn't be mates because it's established that in this universe, not everybody has a mate, and sometimes mate connections are not reciprocated. So I thought there was a chance that they would just like choose to be together and that would be a really interesting take, but no, they're just mates, so not that interesting. Basically, I think if you're in the market for like a heterosexual ABO book that is very lighthearted in its tone, then it's probably good for you, but everything about it was off-putting to me in almost every way. I also gave this one 2 out of 5 on Goodreads, and now I'm really hoping whatever I read next will actually get me into like the romance zone. Like I want to read something that I heavily enjoy, and almost reading this one makes me want to go back and give King of Sloth 3 out of 5 stars because it is better. And I liked it somewhat. I might go for Wild Love, the one I picked up at the store next, because we're about to hit that, you know, after Christmas Day vibe where I might just want to chill and snuggle up with a book. Okay, so you and I both know that I said I would probably read, what's it called? Wild Love next? Yes, it's called Wild Love. But I have started listening to another audiobook because I have been overtaken by the post-Christmas urge to declutter my life. And right now, what I want to do more than anything in the whole world is reorganize my bookshelf. So I just started Play Along by Liz Tomforde. I'm on chapter 2 and I chose this one because while it hasn't been a white Christmas, it has been a wet one, and this cover had like lightning on it and stuff. I am going to reach a point where I have to read all of the summer ones, so I don't know why I am attaching the books I'm reading so much to the weather, but that's what I'm doing. Anyway, I am kind of enjoying it so far. Like it's just barely started and things could go south from here, but it's a good little start. So I guess this is a part of a larger series, but the type of romance series that appears a few times on this top 10 list, where you don't necessarily have to read in chronological order because they're not related that closely, and it's more about all being a part of the same setting. So I think all of these books are sports romances set in Chicago. It's called the Windy City series, and I might be wrong, but I'm getting the vibe that the male lead of this one, Isaiah, who plays baseball, is brothers with one of the leads from the other books. The female lead, Kennedy, wants to get into sports medicine. She has an MD, but she's running into a lot of obstacles because of her gender. So she got the job she has with this baseball team by putting Kenny as a nickname for Kennedy on her application. But the big boss was upset about that little trick because he doesn't hire women as a rule, as not to encourage canoodling among the team and people on the staff. So while HR informed him that he couldn't fire her, he demoted her to a position that isn't in medicine. I think she's a trainer or something. And so while it was pandery, I was really endeared to the male lead right away, because in the opening, he's overhearing this conversation between the boss and Kennedy and thinking about how sexist it is. And I was like, oh, do we have an ally on our hands? Then when you get to the first chapter, it time jumps to when Kennedy has been working with the team for a while and Isaiah has maintained an unrequited crush on her, which is one of my favorite tropes. So I'm just feeling it so far. I'm excited about it. The voice actors for this one, because there are two, one for both perspectives, are so much better than the one that was in Bride. I will say, unlike in King of Sloth, which also has the two narrators, the opposite leads don't jump into each other's chapters to do their own dialogue, which isn't awesome. I loved that they did that for King of Sloth, because I don't intuitively love hearing a man do a woman's impression or a woman do a man's impression, but I usually can get used to it throughout a book if it is just the one perspective. It's just a little jarring getting to know Isaiah's voice, getting to know Kennedy's voice, and then jumping into each other's chapters and hearing them impersonate each other. Like, then you have to get used to it every chapter. It's interesting that when you do listen to so many audiobooks as opposed to reading with your eyeballs, that part of my opinions and part of my perspectives are just so informed by that format. That's why I don't want to listen to audiobooks exclusively. I do want to read this one here physically. I just need to do cleaning all the time. I don't know what happened to me today. I was going to sit down, relax, and read this, but I was like, I can't relax. I have things all over and they need to be put in different places. So that's the mood I'm in. Basically, my impulsive urge to declutter has led me to desperately wanting a new bed frame. Not even one with a headboard. I'm just looking for one that will help me to be able to like slide things under my bed for more storage. So I'm at a furniture store and I'm gonna see what they've got. But before I forget about my thoughts on Play Along, I wanted to tell you them. Anyway, I liked it. It was probably my favorite so far, besides Funny Story, which I read prior to embarking on this journey. When I last talked to you, I had just introduced you to the characters, Isaiah and Kennedy, but the plot hadn't really begun. It ended up, obviously, based on the title, being a fake dating romance, and one that I thought took a creative approach. I have felt like fake dating is a little over present right now because of how specific of a trope it is. So something like enemies to lovers is really vague, and all sorts of books can advertise themselves under that label. Something like fake dating has more specific beats in mind, so I find them very repetitive. So if you're going to do fake dating, I want you to do something new and interesting with it. I need to find a time to sit down and talk about Funny Story, actually, but something I liked about that book was that fake dating kind of seemed like clickbait for it. Like, it's technically a fake dating book, but we don't really dwell on that. The characters just kind of fall in love like in private. In that way, Play Along is a little more standard. I would say they are more officially, for a longer period of time, fake dating, but they're also legitimately married. The way it plays out is that early on, like shortly after I last updated you, they drunkenly get married, and then so that Kennedy won't lose her job because she fraternized with a player, they pretend that they have been like seriously dating in secret for a long time. From a logical perspective, I'm not sure that the logic of like whether or not she would lose her job for this checks out, but like whatever, it's the setup. What I think makes it unique is just the fact that Isaiah as a character wants to be with Kennedy and himself isn't faking anything. She's viewing their marriage as like a year-long thing that will let her keep her job until she gets a new one. But he's like, oh, okay, I have a year to get my wife to fall in love with me. And I think that's just a new and more interesting take on fake dating, to have those like two different goals going into it. There are actually a few other ways in which I think this book took cliches and made them its own. So for instance, because they are pretending to be married and they have to travel for away games, you obviously get like the one bed trope, but I love what was done with the one bed trope. Up until they actually get together, they don't share a bed. Isaiah takes the floor and Kennedy takes the bed. But the first time they snuggle and sleep together, it's actually her getting on the floor to join him because he gets anxiety during storms. And I just like that. It's like, instead of falling together in the same bed or sharing a bed and finding yourselves cuddling in the morning, she like goes to the floor and they sleep on the floor. It's just a new little spin, and maybe that's happened before, but I still appreciated it. I mean, I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It didn't blow me away, but I think it was consistently good at being what it is. I had fun with it, I liked it, and that's somewhat a good thing because I'm feeling inspired to read more, but somewhat a bad thing because I have to read more of these top 10 romances when what I would like to do is look further into this Windy City series. But I also wonder if part of what made Play Along feel more unique is the fact that it was a later entry to this series, so it was forced to take like the sports romance genre and do something new with it. Isaiah has the energy of like a side character who gets his own spin-off, and I think that it was that energy that made me enjoy Play Along. It is also very smutty. I think that's what I'm in for. I think that's what all of these are gonna be like. I mean, I know that romance is often a smutty genre, right? But I guess in my mind, the perfect amount of smut in your romance novel is about the amount that an Emily Henry does. So like, for the most part in her novels, you are doing character work, you are doing plot stuff, and then towards the end there are 1 or 2 big sex scenes. But most of these other books so far have done so much more character work and stuff at the beginning, and then once you reach the point where the characters are getting at it, every other chapter is a sex scene. And I know that's how some people like it. I see the people on Book Talk with their spiso meters or whatever. I don't like calling it spice. To me, that grosses me out. But I will say, I did like the way intimacy played out between Isaiah and Kennedy. She as a character does not have a lot of romantic experience, and her one like serious previous relationship was pretty emotionally abusive. So once she's married to Isaiah and feeling the chemistry, she's like, what if we try some stuff so that I can learn some stuff? It was interesting. I liked it that it was involved with her character. The sex scenes mattered for her development as a person as well. Now I'm gonna go look for a bed frame and continue my winter cleaning. All right, I'll have you know that I did it. I decluttered majorly. My records are reorganized, my clothes are reorganized, my bookshelf is reorganized. The point is, I'm reading Wild Love. So far, I mean, I'm super early in. I've just basically met the leads. It is another billionaire book. The male lead is the son of a rich guy who, like, I don't know how he got rich himself, because reportedly he didn't get any handouts from his dad or whatever. But now he is opening a production studio in Rose Hill, which is like a Canadian mountain town. And the female lead is his best friend's little sister, I think. Her name is Rosie. She's in like Vancouver or something. She was just sexually harassed at work, so she's not happy about that, and I bet that she's gonna quit and then come to Rose Hill to spend some time with her brother. But like, immediately the thing that's going on with the male lead, and I do not remember his name, is a 12-year-old girl, Cora, has come to his doorstep and said, I'm your biological daughter from that time you donated sperm. So that's not what I was expecting. I haven't really been reading the blurbs for any of these before getting into them, because I like going into things blind. But like, now I feel as though I'm going to be disappointed if this Cora character doesn't have any large bearing on the plot, because that like seems like it should be the main thing going on. Like, I don't even know how he's gonna fall in love. when he's got a new daughter. So we'll see. I apologize, but like one more thing. I just continued onward and I got annoyed by something. I just finished page 29, and at the end of page 29, the billionaire has gotten into his Mercedes with his biological daughter Cora, and she's just revealed that they're gonna have to drive 3 hours all the way to Calgary. Then you go to the next page, no stops, no chapter markers, no nothing. We pull up in front of a typical split level home, and now they are at her house in Calgary. What just happened? I went back because I thought I missed a page. I guess I was able to figure it out, but to me that's insane. To me, you have to say, and the drive was rough, blah blah blah. I don't like how it did that to me. I'm about to go to bed, but if you'll allow me just a little more premature wild love commentary. I have read a minuscule amount. Can you see where that bookmark is? And it is so rushed. Perhaps my opinion will change. There is plenty of time for development. I mean, it isn't a thin book, but right now I am like so thrown off by how quickly everything is moving. Like so many of these books, it's going back and forth between the perspectives of the male lead and the female lead, which means they've both had like 2 or 3 chapters each. In Rosie's first chapter, she goes to work, gets felt up by her boss, and talks about it with her boyfriend. Then in her next chapter, she's in Rose Hill. Did we walk with her through that process of deciding to come back to live with her brother? No. Do we know what she's told her boyfriend about where she's going? No. Now from Ford's perspective, you get a little bit with him and his best friend where he's talking about opening his production studio. Then, at the end of his first chapter, a 12-year-old girl, Cora, shows up. Like, hey, you're my biological dad. My adoptive father is dead, and my mom, who used your sperm, she's depressed about it, so I don't have any other family, and I think that you need to have temporary custody of me. So then in his next chapter, he's like, okay, let's go see your mom. Time jump through the 3-hour car ride, and they go meet her mom, but like we don't see a conversation with her mom, mind you. Like Ford, which by the way, the reason I couldn't remember his name at first, Ford is a stupid first name, but what I'm saying is we don't see them discuss the matter any further. We don't see any legalities of the situation at all. And then the next time we see Ford, Cora is living with him. She's moved in, and at this point Rosie is running into Cora and introducing herself, and she's like, I'm Ford's new daughter. This is all in the first 5 chapters. There is so much information missing. So many scenes missing. We are flying through major events. In a different book, all of this stuff would have been the whole first act or even like the whole first half. But it just feels like I have not had time to connect to these characters, because even when extremely big life events and changes are happening, it's like we're waltzing through it. We're dancing through it. We're summarizing it like nothing interesting is going on. Anyway, it's stressing me out so far. Alright, it's a new night and I finished Wild Love. I must admit it did slow down. It wasn't as rushed as it was in the first couple of chapters the whole time, but almost to the extent where it slowed down to a halt, and most of the book was just them hanging out. I cannot say I loved it. I believe in my previous rantings and ravings, I had gotten you caught up to the point where Cora showed up and Rosie came back to town. The main setup thing that hadn't happened yet was Rosie getting a job as Ford's assistant. So actually, if I had to pick a number one thing I did not like, it was this fact that she becomes his assistant. Because in general, I can read a boss and employee romance without getting caught up on how sticky that situation would be realistically, because it's a fictional power imbalance, so who cares really? But if I may remind you, in the beginning of this book, we are introduced to Rosie as she is being sexually harassed by her boss, and then when she threatens to go to HR about it, she is unjustly fired. My point is that the entire book is framed within this conflict, within her trauma of being touched inappropriately by somebody with this power over her. And I don't know, that complaint sort of extends to a lot of elements of this book that just don't seem to add up to me. Like, it was too much of everything and not enough of anything. I don't really get why anything is the way that it is, or like why this is the story that was told. Like, just going back to the fact that he's a billionaire in general, when the book isn't awfully interested in engaging with what makes a billionaire romance enticing to people. In a way, it made me appreciate King of Sloth more, because in King of Sloth, Javier lives a baller lifestyle. The whole first act is them on a luxurious vacation. We spend time in like board meetings. His love interest is literally his publicist. But in Wild Love, Ford has moved back to this mountain town where he does all of the cooking and cleaning and shopping online for himself. And the whole time I'm like, you're a billionaire. Because like, he could have just been rich. He could have just been a millionaire. But like, he's a billionaire. So like, first of all, redistribute the wealth, solve world hunger, and then hire somebody to clean out this studio you bought instead of doing it yourself. It's just that sort of thing where like, clearly this book was made to be tagged with the billionaire romance tag, but then it doesn't really engage with billionaire romance stuff. Another example is just the entire character of Cora and this entire storyline of him adopting his long lost daughter. I will say more development did come. There are a few cute scenes in this book of them bonding and whatnot, but the vast majority of the time, I would say she's just kind of hanging out in his house. Most of the actual energy in this book is put towards the romance between Rosie and Ford. So Cora sort of hangs around and they occasionally talk about how she's so cool, but there's not a real sense of like the emotional struggle for her of being thrown into this new life, or the emotional struggle for Ford inviting her into his life. Like, we gloss over all of that, and then she's just like their roommate. So it's like, you could have just written a book about a single dad. Like, why add all of this extra stuff to it if there isn't going to be any drama or conflict or stakes that arise from the fact that she is like his sperm baby? Like, another thing along those lines is Rosie's relationship to her boyfriend that she had in the first chapter. She gets fired from her job and moves away on a whim, but for the first bit of this book, she is still technically in a relationship with some guy called Ryan, and neither on his part or on her part is this breakup arc really emotional or meaningful at all. Even within her first chapter, before she has made the call to move away, she's thinking to herself about how bored she is in this relationship. So she's not invested, and neither is he, because when he comes to town, he's like, are you gonna break up with me? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, I saw that coming and I get it. And that's the breakup. Do you see what I mean? It's like, why am I reading you? Why am I reading you if nothing matters or is gonna provoke any feeling in me, or if none of the characters even care what's going on? Oh, but like, another thing that didn't really amount to anything is the fact that Rosie is his best friend's sister. You just get to the point where they're in a relationship and Ford goes to tell Weston? Yeah, I think it is Weston. He goes to tell Weston that he's in love with Rosie, and he's like,
about time you found out.
And it was like, great. So officially, nothing matters at all, and nobody cares, and there's no reason for me to be reading this. So anyway, that's my take on Wild Love, but I still think it has the best cover. And with that, I'm officially halfway done, because I have read 5 of the 10, and part of me wishes I had just said I'm gonna read the top 5, but we've got more to go. I'm committed. 3 of the remaining books are what I am considering summer books. 2 of them literally have summer in the name. So I might finally approach all 3 of those next just as a trifecta, because then the remaining 2 seem to have a very opposite vibe of like dark romance and wholesome romance. So I think it would be fun to close out on that juxtaposition. For now, I thought it would be fun to rank what I've read so far while leaving space within a ranking of 10 to see if I can blind rank the rest of them. Should I have started a blind ranking from the beginning if I wanted to do this? Perhaps. But it just occurred to me now. And I might actually have to come closer for this. Could you all even see me back there? I don't know. Like, new year, new me, I'm trying new angles and things, but this is a little weird, huh? Like, you and me in my bed, I don't know about that. So the only thing I'm fairly confident about is I just don't think I'll like anything more than Funny Story. I suppose this is as good a moment as any to go over my thoughts on Funny Story because I read it prior to starting this project, but I hate to say it, I don't have a detailed enough memory of what I liked about it. I just read Funny Story for fun, and all I remember is that it was my favorite Emily Henry book I had read that far. It was about Miles and Daphne, and they had both been in relationships with exes who dumped them to get with each other. So then they end up being roommates because of the moving situation that happened with that, because they were like in live-in relationships. And you start the book in a place where they aren't even like particularly close roommates. They're not enemies or friends. They literally just coexist, which I thought was a really unique place for a romance to start. And then it briefly becomes a fake dating scenario where, to stick it to their exes, they start posting pictures together and stuff. But there are really very few moments in the book where they are made to perform that they are in a relationship. And I think one of the big questions was whether or not Daphne would move out of town because she moved to this place for her ex. But in the end, she's like, wait, I really like my job at the library, and just staying here wouldn't mean staying here for my ex. Like, what if I like this place now? And I remember my favorite thing about it being the male lead. You know, generally I find male leads very hit or miss, but he was very unique to me. He was like a tatted bartender, gig worker guy. So anyway, A+. I would be very surprised if any of the next 5 outrank Funny Story for me. Now, taking into consideration the other 5 I've read already, what would be second place behind it? You know what? I'm gonna say Play Along. I might leave 2 as a gap and put Play Along at 3 just in case any of the next 5 are up there. But I don't even think Play Along would make a bad second place. I was very surprised, actually, to find that after I read it or listened to it, I've still been thinking about it. And I don't know if it was just those 2 characters or the writing style, but I would just like to check out another one of the books in that series because it would be fun if I could like them all. I will say, considering how many of these books are a part of these setting-based or like family-based series, I do like that method for romance, because it's like, if you find a style and a subgenre that really lands with people, you do want to continue that. You want to let people keep existing in this world, but this isn't romantasy. This isn't an easy genre to write sequels for. I actively hate most straight romance sequels because, as I've talked about many times, a prerequisite to be considered a romance novel or a romance movie is a happily ever after. So in order to make a sequel, you have to like break them up. You have to ruin the ending that was established to like re-put them together. And it's just such a slog. That's why in the world of rom-coms, I so prefer to a sequel when they get the same actors to just do an entirely new rom-com together. And in the world of books, yeah, write a spin-off about a side character. Sounds perfect. We can continue existing in the world. We can get cameos from the characters that we've previously read about, but it's not a sequel. It's perfect. It's the perfect system. Anyway, that's 2 down. What would be third place? Or should we start working from the bottom now? Yeah, I guess out of the 5 we've read so far, let's decide a least favorite. Sorry to say we. I mean, maybe you love Bride or Wild Love, because it's between those 2. Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know, it's a classic contest between like what's more boring and what I actively disliked more. Because I found Bride more actively laughable, like there were parts of it that I really very much disliked, where Wild Love just disappointed me. I found it very flaccid and boring. You know what though, especially because I'm blind ranking and I don't know what's to come, I think I just have to go with last place is what I actively disliked the most, because I don't want to end up in a position where I'm ranking Wild Love behind something that really sucks. Like, we have a dark romance coming up, and the likelihood of me enjoying the dark romance is not high. So the question for me now is, should Bride be 10 or 9? Yeah, I'm gonna go up to 8. All right, I'm gonna give Bride 9, but then it does feel rude because I do feel like I'm operating under the assumption that I'm gonna hate Leather and Lark. But you know what? I'm open to being proven wrong. That's a very ugly E. Feel free to ignore it. And then I don't know where I want to put Wild Love, but you know what? I do feel pretty good about putting King of Sloth at 5. I'm gonna put Wild Love right above Bride here. We'll see how I feel about what's on its way. So yeah, it is currently the Saturday before I go back to work, so I will be back on the bus come Monday, and because of that, it's gonna be audiobooks again. But this upcoming weekend, I will be traveling to LA to judge a debate tournament, so I might get a physical copy of one of the books to read on the plane. I just feel like I have to challenge myself sometimes to read physically because I have grown so accustomed to audiobooks. I think a lot of audiobook discourse is annoying, mainly in the sense that I don't think anybody should tell you you haven't read a book if you listened to the audiobook, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a different experience to listen to an audiobook and to physically sit down and read a book. And I just want to make sure I'm still doing both. I want to make sure I'm doing both. I will say I'm way more prone to listening to audiobooks when I am doing a project like this. Anyway, I'll see you when I see ya. On my bus ride home, I started Just for the Summer by, I forgot the author's name, but I'll show you the cover. And you can see on the cover, I think I've listened to about 30% of it now, and I love it so far. I'm having the best time. It's such a relief to say that because I know I've been a little bit of a hater about some of these books, and that's honestly been worrying me because, as you know, part of the whole idea behind this exercise was getting back to my roots and reconnecting with what's in now for the romance genre, which is like reportedly, allegedly my main genre, the thing I love. And it's made me feel like a bit of a fraud. Like, do I even like this genre, or have I outgrown it in some way? Which would be ridiculous because my whole thing is that I don't think romance is a frivolous genre that one could like grow out of. I'm just really glad that as I was listening to this on the bus, I was like cheesing the whole time. I feel the other people on the bus must have thought I was crazy. I'll have you know, I've become a bus regular. They no longer have me pull the string to say when I need to get off because the bus driver just knows me and he knows where I need to go, which is nice. Anyway, Just for the Summer is about a travel nurse named Emma and a guy with a job I forgot named Justin, and they meet online through a Reddit Am I the Asshole post. Basically, Justin shares a story to Reddit about how he named his dog after his best friend who ended up with a girl he was going out with. And this leads to him describing his like curse that every girl after dating him meets the one. So he's known as like a good luck charm. It's a whole thing. And then this Reddit story is sent to Emma, who has apparently the same thing going on. So she reaches out to him, and for the first bit of this book, they just message back and forth, and I actually really loved their banter. It's so important, I'm noticing, that the author of a book just happens to share my sense of humor and that they write dialogue that actually sounds witty to me. It's like that saying, like, a character can only be as smart as the author is. And I guess that's insulting to the other authors, but I just mean when I'm reading Emma's and Justin's texts back and forth, I'm like, these seem like texts that if I were having on a dating app, I would be like, oh, this is interesting. I should go out with this one. And as someone, by the way, who's a 21st century girl who's done most of my dating by meeting people from online, I really do like this book's depiction of the banter and how that works and how it manages to romanticize it. Like a Reddit thread being the meet cute of this book, it's very now, but it doesn't feel forced or anything. Like it all felt very natural. So anyway, because Emma is a travel nurse, she and her best friend choose a new place to move to every 3 months or so. And having chatted a lot to Justin, they decide to move to Minnesota instead of where they were going to go for the summer, because Minnesota is where Justin lives. So now they're going to be able to date, and this is somewhat under the pretense that they are dating to break the curse. Like, after they date each other, they'll break up and then meet their loves. But the characters themselves are already sort of admitting to each other that they just actually want to date. So I think it would disappoint me if I get further into the book and it becomes a conflict where she's like, we are supposed to break up, and he's like, but what if we don't? Because, like, clearly you're just dating now. You're just dating now. I mean, it depends on how that's done. Like, I do expect there to be some turmoil in the sense that she is still set to leave Minnesota soon. But yeah, I just find them cute. I like them. And their individual storylines as far as like their personal traumas and their families and their lives, I'm finding all of that really interesting as well. So basically the reasoning behind why Emma is so into travel is because she had a neglectful mother. So she was fostered by her best friend's moms, and this is the best friend who she currently lives with and travels with. And there's a little conflict brewing based on the fact that Emma doesn't really view, I think her name is Maddie's moms, as her family, but that she does have a lot of affection for her own mother, who has like screwed them over a number of times in the past. And Maddie isn't very nice about her mom because of the behavior she's witnessed. So I just find that whole conflict really realistic. Justin, on the other hand, came from a loving home, but his dad died in a car accident. And sometime after that, his mom got caught embezzling from work. So now she is going to prison, and he, like soon after the part in the novel I'm in now, is going to gain custody of his younger siblings. So obviously there's a juxtaposition there of like stability and him having to become the stable figure in this family, and her being like a freewheeler who is always moving, and like, I'm interested to see how they end up together because I want them to end up together. All of that considered, though, there is a critique I have, and it's not like a big deal, but it's just a recurring thing about the writing style that's making me go like, eh. And that is that some lines and events don't feel entirely original, and not like in the sense that it involves tropes, more like very specific lines. So the most recent example from this book that bothered me would be a conversation Emma and Justin are having about his soon-to-be detained mother, where Emma is arguing for forgiveness, or at least empathy, because she is very much that kind of person. And he's like stewing in anger and sort of arguing that he should be allowed to be angry. So she's trying to offer empathetic explanations as to why his mother might have embezzled. Like, maybe she was going through something, maybe she was depressed, maybe she had a postpartum depression. So then he says, you're saying she got so depressed that she stole a bunch of money? And then Emma says, people get so depressed that they kill themselves. And it's not a bad line, it's just that I've seen that on TikTok. I've seen that. And it's just like a few lines that come off like that to me. Generally, I really like the dialogue in this book, but every once in a while something comes up where I'm like, I saw that tweet. I literally saw that tweet. But I'll leave you at that for now. Hello, I am coming to you from Saturday the 11th of January at like 7 a.m. That is my dog hitting the back door because he would like to go outside. And it's crazy that he wants to go outside because I literally just walked him for like an hour finishing an audiobook. And I finished, what's the book called? Oh, You're My Phone, so I can't check. Let's see. This Summer Will Be Different by Carley something, who is an author I've discovered I've actually read before. I read her book Every Summer After. Very similar titles. Anyway, I actually started listening to this book on the bus on Wednesday afternoon, but I haven't updated you at all, mainly because I didn't really get into it until yesterday. I basically started the first chapter over and over again. So I actually downloaded the ebook, and I've been sort of half reading and half listening to this one. I think the dog's getting into trouble. One moment. This is Rollo. Oh, I don't want you to lick my face. He likes to stand out here in the freezing cold. Back to the counter where I'm eating my bell peppers and drinking it with coffee, which I've decided right now, right here, is not a good combo. these are not pairing. Let me shift this a bit. So unless I'm forgetting something, this is actually the first book that doesn't have dual perspectives. I didn't realize that until now, but I guess that's the norm in romance these days. I remember a time when the norm was single POV books, but nowadays it's all about his and hers perspectives. This book is just from the main character. Her first name is Lucy, so that's what the love interest calls her, but her best friend calls her B because her last name is Ashby. Her best friend is named Bridget, and they live in Vancouver? Toronto? It's a major Canadian city. Just jumping in here during the editing process because I do not think this is the first time in this video I've named a random Canadian city as the place where a character is from. And for that, I am sorry, because I do realize that Vancouver and Toronto are very far apart, and that would be the equivalent of saying this character is either from New York or LA, you know, a major American city. So to make up for it, I did look it up, and Lucy and Bridget are from Toronto. I'm so sorry to Canada. But Bridget is from Prince Edward Island, where Anne of Green Gables is set. So the book is really set there in PEI because the love interest is Bridget's brother who lives back at home. So while there aren't two perspectives, there are two timelines, one set in the present and one that spans 5 years of the past leading up to the present. So in the present, Bridget is about to get married, but she's mysteriously flown back to PEI and is telling everyone she just wants to have like one last hurrah. But it's clearly more than that, and she's clearly stressed about something. It's discovered later that she's stressed because her soon-to-be husband got a job in Australia, so she's going to be moving. But Lucy flies back to PEI to hang out, see what's wrong, assess the situation, and obviously there she ends up interacting with Bridget's brother, who is named Felix, but she's the only one who calls him Felix. Everybody else calls him Wolf. So what you flash back to in the previous timeline is the relationship between Felix and Lucy over the years since she first traveled to Bridget's hometown. In the first year, they meet and hook up before they realize that they know each other through Bridget, which is a problem because Bridget specifically specified that one of her rules for traveling to her hometown is that Lucy wouldn't fall in love with her brother, which doesn't come out of nowhere kissing booth style. She makes this rule because her childhood best friend had a broken engagement with Felix. So anyway, initially they're like, let's keep this a secret and never do it again. But of course, over the 5 years, they hook up a lot on and off. And it all leads up to the wedding. Each present day chapter is marked by like a days until the wedding type thing. I will say that one of my least favorite aspects of the novel was how confusing I found the timelines, and I want to specify that I am not normally confused by past and present timelines. Like, I am not somebody who watched Little Woman 2019 confused. So I guess to specify what about the timelines I found confusing, I will say that I wasn't ever confused by the present timeline. Once we got back to the lead up to the wedding, I was like, this is where we are. Cool. Good. And because of that, I always knew when we were in the past. What I struggled with was the progression of the past, like the span of that 5 years. I had to constantly remind myself which year we were in, what had already happened like that summer of their interaction. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that their relationship was so on and off, because theoretically, if their relationship had a lot more of a linear progression where, say, they hook up in the beginning and then they really don't ever hook up again up until like the year before, and it's that fallout that you're dealing with in the present, then I don't think I'm confused. But these two, ever since they've known each other for the whole past 5 years, have been on again, off again, kissing and then not kissing, hooking up and not hooking up, having these moments in between, areas where they aren't talking, times when they are talking. And maybe because in romance there is such emphasis put on the first kiss between a pairing, what I was struggling with was whenever we went back to the past, knowing whether in that specific year they had already broken that barrier again. So for me, it's not about plot holes or numbers, the ages, or anything like that. It's just about my ability to connect to the romance, because you have to be able to emotionally connect to the timeline, the progression of a relationship in a romance. That was probably one of two major issues I had with the book that really kept me from connecting to it. The other one would be a distinct telling over showing quality, especially in the exposition in the beginning. I think that's why it took me so long to get into it. And I think the prevailing example of this is the character of Bridget in the first couple of chapters. I mean, the prologue and the first chapter are all in the past storyline, and that tells the story of when Felix and Lucy first met, when they hooked up before they realized they both knew Bridget. And throughout that whole section, your whole first impression of the novel, there are just countless paragraphs about how great and wonderful Bridget is. Lucy is like constantly in her narration saying, Bridget has done everything for me. She's the wind beneath my wings. She is the reason I have survived this long, and I would do anything for her. And it's like, I love female friendship, and that all sounds nice, but I don't know this woman, because eventually you do meet Bridget. And I can't say I ever really felt that their relationship was as meaningful as I was told it was supposed to be. I mean, when I think of fictional friendships that really draw me in, that I'm really sold by, and I try to untangle what about their dynamic makes me believe it, it is never because they talk so highly of each other, or because they can say that they've done a lot for each other, or they couldn't live without each other. I mean, a good fictional friendship is built off of strong dialogue. Like, you start the book having them interact in a way that just gives friends. You'd have to read it to understand how much this book, like, doth attest. That's what I'd call it. The book doth attest too much to the relationships at its center, because I think this is even a problem in the romance. I guess in the sense of commitment, this is a slow burn romance, because they're just hooking up for a long time until they reach this point in the present day where they decide to, like, give it a go. But it is emotionally and physically not a slow burn romance at all, because obviously you start on a chapter where they're hooking up. I mean, I think it would be a hard job for basically any author to sell that kind of chemistry in one chapter. So you end up in this scenario where at the beginning of their relationship, a lot of the inner dialogue, a lot of the narration is just about how attractive Lucy finds Felix. Like, pretty much all of their early hookups come with this vibe in the narration of Lucy just having to be like, wow, he's hot. I'd like to climb on him like a tree and get my hands on that one. Why I oughta... Like, I haven't known these people that long. I haven't witnessed that many scenes of them connecting through humor or physically or whatever. So I just have to, like, take your word for it. Like, you're hot for each other. Got it. Fine. And anyway, the other major character that this telling over showing aspect applies to is Lucy's dead aunt, Stacy. It is a while before you get a proper flashback scene with Stacy, where you're getting dialogue from Stacy. But before that point, there's a lot of talk about Stacy in the book. She'll just randomly in the narration reference that dead aunt that she loved so much and who was the coolest. And, like, once I met her, Stacy does seem cool, but there was a long stretch of time where I was like, who are you talking about? I don't know her. I literally don't know her. Like, sure, she's awesome. I believe you, I guess. Can we do a scene where, like, you're talking to somebody and I can decide what I think of them? So I guess if I'm moving on to things I liked all of the Anne of Green Gables references. That's cute, if not all that relevant. This Summer Will Be Different feels very narratively unconnected to Anne of Green Gables, but, like, sure, let's do Anne quotes. That's fine with me. I liked Felix's ex-fiance and Bridget's ex-best friend. Her name is Amy, and she could have been, like, a villain character, but there was something a little more interesting done with her where she's, like, perfectly nice, and there isn't a huge conflict made out of the fact that Felix is dating another one of his sister's best friends. Pretty much everybody just gets over that. And there is a wild love-like element to that where it's like, okay, why am I reading if Bridget's not going to care, and if Felix isn't going to care, and if Amy isn't going to care? But there was a little bit more conflict made out of that just based in the fact that Lucy was afraid that Bridget would be mad. In Wild Love, like, nobody cares the whole time about anything ever. This Summer Will Be Different isn't full of conflict. Like, characters are generally pretty mature and big fights don't really break out, but there is still tension in the air. Like, there are stakes in the sense that you feel like a fight could break out, and that's good enough. It's fine. I gave it a 2, but it could also be a 3. I don't know. Let me think about it. I actually went back and changed my rating for King of Sloth from 2 to 3, mainly because I gave Bride and Wild Love 2s, and I liked King of Sloth better. It just feels like if I'm mentally ranking books, the star ratings I give them should reflect that ranking. But now that I'm thinking about it, did I ever even come on here and tell you what I rated Just for the Summer? Let me check. Let me see what I have recorded. Okay, so it turns out my last video about Just for the Summer was an update, and I never told you when I finished it. So I finished it. But yeah, I gave it 5 stars because I had a stellar time. I don't have my whiteboard out here, but I would place it now below Funny Story because I already put Funny Story number 1, but that would actually be a debate. Like, I don't know which one of those I prefer. And nothing about my opinions of it really changed based on the ending. I will say I remember complimenting that I liked how complicated the main character's relationship was with her mother, and things towards the end don't get less complicated, but they do get less conflicting. So I sort of liked that even though her mom was terrible in so many ways, she did have a certain amount of affection for her. I thought that was unique and relatable and realistic. But towards the end, she finds out some more stuff her mom did that she doesn't even know. She finds out she has this whole secret family. Anyway, the ending ends up being more about boundary setting, and she ends up cutting her mom out of her life entirely. I was a little torn about it because it is different than what I liked in the beginning, which is a sense of like, okay, this person isn't perfect, but they're my family and somebody has to look out for them. But then the ending is much more like, actually, you have to protect your peace sometimes, and if people are like truly that horrible to you, it is okay not to lend them that emotional energy. And I kind of agree with both of these perspectives in different scenarios, and in her scenario I think the cutting off made sense. So it didn't make me dislike the book. It was different than I thought. Anyway, you'd think based on how much I enjoyed Just for the Summer that I would be eager to read the other books in that series, but I'm really not feeling that eager to read those. Like, I would rather check out the other books in the Windy City Play Along series, and I would rather check out the other 7 Deadly Sins in the King of Sloth series, which I think would be because I only liked Play Along and King of Sloth well enough to be convinced that other entries to those series would also be serviceable. But because I liked Just for the Summer so much, it feels like nothing could compare to them in the same universe. They're my faves, and I don't want to read about other people in their world because they're the main event. I was reading through some of the other reviews for that book on Goodreads, and a lot of people were complaining about Justin and Emma being boring, and to be fair, they don't slot in to very popular tropes like even enemies or friends to lovers. They don't fake date, they don't do any of that trendy stuff. They literally meet online and then date on purpose. And that's their romance. But there was just something really convincing about their chemistry to me, and the fact that they didn't have a ton of drama didn't mean that the book didn't have stakes or interest, because there was all this stuff with her mom. There was this massive issue of the fact that they don't live in the same place. So I don't know. I was not bored, and I will defend them. But it did make me think about how I don't like a ton of these books, and maybe other people do like them. And I want you to know, if you like a book I don't like, then that's okay. And we'll be fine, I think. I'll update the whiteboard later. For now, the mission is to knock out a few more of these books this weekend. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I was supposed to fly out to California, specifically LA, this weekend to judge a debate tournament, but obviously with the fires going on, that is not happening. But like, that's no skin off my back. I'm just gonna read this weekend instead, and obviously it's much more tragic for the people who are over there. I will find ways you can donate and help to link in the description. But next for me will be, I think it's called The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. Christina Lauren is not a one person. That's 2 first names of 2 authors who co-write books. And I have read a few of theirs before, actually. And I haven't even meant to. Like, these aren't people whose careers I've followed, but their books are always showing up in recommendations and things, so I've just ended up accidentally reading how many? I've read Love and Other Words. I've read The Unhoneymooners, and I want to believe there's another one. Let me look at this up. Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. The dog would like to go out again. This is the last time I film in the kitchen, so I shouldn't get that deep into it, but maybe I will go into my thoughts on those books a little to let you know sort of what I expect from a novel from these authors. I would expect, likely for me, a 3-star read. That's what I gave The Unhoneymooners and 11 Other Words. And in both cases for pretty similar reasons. That is to say that I very much bought into the setup of the romances and I really liked the characters and where things were headed, but the third act conflicts of both of those novels ruined everything for me. I then hated everybody, especially in The Unhoneymooners. Oh, the way that book ends pissed me off so bad. I can't really remember the exact scenario that happened, but she was sexually harassed by somebody that the male lead knew for a long time, and then nobody believed her. And they all questioned her, and it was horrible. It was horrible, and I hated everyone. And the same thing happened for Love in Other Words. It was another one with a past and present timeline, so the whole time you're wondering how the characters broke up in the past, like what the big conflict was to make that happen. So even though I really loved the setup and I fell in love with the characters, I enjoyed the way they got together, I found the writing of their beginnings very beautiful, I was so annoyed by their breakup story and all of the drama that surrounded it. Basically, the male lead, back in the past when they were teenagers, got so drunk that he slept with somebody else thinking it was the female lead, as if he was like hallucinating or something. I don't know, something that does not happen when you're drinking. It's not a hallucinogenic. I don't know what's happening. And it annoyed me no matter which way I sliced it or looked at it, because realistically, if he was so drunk that he was being like guided through the sexual encounter by this girl without saying her name correctly or any of this stuff, then he was assaulted. Like, that's kind of what it sounds like. And I don't like that, but the book also doesn't treat it like that. It treats it like he cheated accidentally. So that's how both of those books ended up being 3 stars. There was something I really liked about them in the beginning that then was squandered by an ending that annoyed me to no end. Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, however, I really loved the whole way through. So we will see what the Paradise Problem has in store for us. I think I'm gonna listen to it today while I get some chores done. It is now Sunday morning and I'm walking the dog again. It's finally snowing around these parts. I finished the Paradise Problem yesterday and I will go further in on my thoughts at a later time. But like overall, I did enjoy the Paradise Problem. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The starlings are murmurating. I love when they do that. Anyway, the only reason I'm updating you now is because this morning I thought I would get a start on another book. But this is my issue. I do not like the book I started today. I just barely started Leather and Lark, which is part of a like dark romance trilogy. I am not far enough into it to even tell you what the premise is, but there were like a bunch of trigger warnings and content warnings. I don't know what I'm in for, but just the tone of the very beginning, it's not for me. So like the very beginning, I don't know if this is a prologue or a first chapter, is the female lead torturing her new ex-boyfriend who she caught cheating on her and also found out was a predator who was like hooking up with underage girls. So I didn't pay enough attention to what was going on. I think I'm gonna have to restart this one, but she like straps him to a firework or something. I don't know. And she was just telling all of these little jokey jokes. The tone, it reminds me so much of Bride. I don't dislike humor in a book. I just feel that humor is a hard thing to write and it doesn't always come across to me that well. But this time I feel like I can more confidently say that it is something to do with the writing and not just the voice actress's interpretation, because this same voice actress was the female lead in Play Along and she didn't cause me any problems in that one. I have the book at 2.5 speed right now. I can understand it perfectly fine when I do it at that speed. I don't know about you people. And still at that speed, it's gonna be like 5 hours. I don't know if I can dedicate 5 hours of this day to listening to Leather and Lark. And I'm not saying it is bad because I haven't read it. I don't know. I can't form an opinion off of the 2 seconds of it I've listened to so far. What I can say is that I know it's not for me. And I'm still gonna have to listen to the whole thing because I made up this stupid activity. Once I finish this, we'll have another to go that I'll hopefully like better. Not that I know what I'll think of the cinnamon bookstore. Anyway, I'm gonna have to do it. I do have things to get done today, like I always meal prep on Sunday, lunches for the week. I know that the timeline here has gotten weird and wacky, but I've sat down to go over my thoughts on the Paradise Problem and my first impression of Leather and Lark. And I'm realizing now that I haven't even gone over the premise of the Paradise Problem. So basically, it's about a girl named Anna, and like prior to the main events of the story, she had been married for housing in college, and she believes herself to be divorced, but the guy who she had this fraudulent marriage with comes back into the picture. His name is Liam. She calls him West because his last name is Weston. And even when they were living together as like technically married roommates, they never really got to talking. So it's at the start of the book that Anna realizes he is a billionaire, and the reason he wanted to get married was because there was a clause in his inheritance from his grandfather that they couldn't get it until they got married. But Anna never really read the fine print in regards to their marriage, so it turns out they're not divorced and they are still married, and he has been carrying on this ruse with his family that he has a wife. So like, luckily within the interim, she didn't try to marry someone else or anything. What she did do in the interim was drop out of medical school and go to art school, and is now like working convenience jobs while she tries to make it as an artist. I guess another relevant detail is that they met through her friend Jake, who is Liam's brother. Listening to this whole book felt very cinematic to me. It felt like watching a movie. And one of a few reasons for that, I think, is the pace. Like, you fly through this setup. He comes over in the first chapter, informs her that they're still married, and basically says that his family is getting suspicious that their marriage isn't real. So now he's asking her to come perform at a family wedding like they are married. So it's very much a fake dating story. And like I said, all of that is confined to the first chapter, and like the second you hit chapter 2, they are on a flight to a private island to his sister's wedding. And by saying this, I don't mean to critique it, because I can't even say it felt rushed. It just felt quick, like we had places to be. I guess it helps that Anna isn't in a place where you need a ton of exposition about her. At the beginning of the first chapter, she is fired, so she doesn't have to get off of work, and she could very much use the money she's going to get. Actually, a little problem I had is similar to a problem I had with Wild Love, because if you'll recall, in Wild Love, it starts out with the female lead being fired from her job because she rejected sexual advances, and then she ends up being hired by the love interest, and he's like a billionaire giving her all of this money. And it's kind of the same situation in the Paradise Problem. Anna is told that she's fired for taking a package of gum without paying for it, but she thinks it's because she had been turning down the manager's advances. But now she's entered into this business arrangement with a billionaire who she's going to fall in love with, who's going to give her a bunch of money. And like, the beginnings of these stories don't bother me, and the ends of these stories don't bother me independently, but it's so weird to me to pair them. Like, if you're going to do the billionaire romance thing, if you're going to do a romance between a boss and an employee, or like a client and a worker of some kind, then you can't start that story off by doing a plot point about predatory power dynamics in workplaces. But I guess that kind of brings me to the number one thing I enjoyed about the Paradise Problem, which is that for a billionaire romance, it is a lot more critical of money than either of the other billionaire romances we've read for this video. I said it when I was talking about Wild Love, and I said it while I was talking about King of Sloth, but I can read a billionaire romance and set aside my like political feelings about billionaires being inherently unethical. But this book kind of agrees. I haven't looked into how this book was advertised, but I would actually be very surprised if it was being hashtagged with billionaire or something like that, because if I were looking for a billionaire romance, I don't think this is what I'd be looking for. I mean, most of the time, this isn't a wish-fulfilling story where an underpaid worker is whisked away by one of the richest men in the world and like never has to worry about finances again. In some ways, it is that and we'll get there. But throughout most of it, I was really impressed by how critical of his family this book was and how intrinsic that was to the story. Like, the conflict in the end isn't so much the leads fighting with each other as it is them fighting against like this giant machine of his like family's company and their wealth, and namely his father. So like, they fly out to this private island, and I bet what you're imagining the second act of this book would be like is pretty much what it's like. They go to a bunch of fancy parties. She has to pretend to be rich. They have to pretend to be in love. They do all the fake dating shenanigans of kissing in front of people and then like not knowing if it's real. I would say it reminds me particularly of The Proposal, which in the realm of rom-coms, I think is that like standard fake dating movie I would think of. I'd also list The Proposal as one of the rom-coms this book reminded me of in a cinematic sense. Stuff like The Proposal and Crazy Rich Asians and even like Anyone But You, because these are all movies where the characters travel elsewhere to fall in love. They're like destination romances. And the way The Paradise Problem is written, it just feels like it would map very well onto a screenplay because there are these set pieces that you want to see visualized, like scenes where they're doing island excursions and scenes where they're at the spa and doing all of this luxurious stuff. It just felt very adaptable to me. I shipped the characters. I liked them. They didn't like blow me away or like steal my heart, but they were solid. I just think this is a solid book that does what you want it to do, unless you go into it thinking billionaire romance. What I can't decide about is the ending. Basically, the father of the Weston family, the business owner, has leverage over West or Liam. The company the family owns is like a grocery chain. And when he was a teenager, Liam designed some technology that would track stock and such, but his father ended up using that technology to surveil employees, and he went even further to sexually harass female employees with the technology. I don't really know what the technology did, but this is what I can recall. So because Liam invented it, his father believes that he'll be able to pin all of that on Liam unless he agrees to come back into the fold and like join the family business again, because he left when he realized that his dad was evil. Another thing is that there was a stipulation in the inheritance clause that if any of the siblings' marriages were found to be fraudulent, then all of the inheritance for all of the siblings would be stripped away. So in the end, Liam is theoretically faced with a decision between not going back to the family company, but in doing so, ruining his life and stripping his siblings of their inheritance, or going back into the fold, going right back under his dad's thumb and essentially being the next heir to the CEO position. And I loved that choice. I thought that was a really interesting position to put him in, particularly because of the way things had been heating up with Anna on the island. Throughout maybe the first half or the first 2/3 of the book, it's pretty much what you'd expect. Anna is flown off into this luxurious world, and while she doesn't relate to these people and she does find them to be like filthy rich, she mostly just enjoys all of the new clothes she's able to buy and all of the spa treatments she's able to get. But the more time goes on and the more she witnesses, the more she becomes like truly like deeply disgusted by this family and like the amount of wealth that they have. A lot of it is just like her witnessing how evil the dad is, but how everybody just does his bidding because he's the one with the money. He's the one with the power to take the money away. But there's more to it. Like in a scene that stuck out to me, she sees employees carting in a bunch of stuff that they shipped in for the wedding or a party leading up to the wedding that is now going to become like trash on this tropical island because they're not going to ship it back. There's a scene where a server accidentally spills on the dad and he gets her fired, which like horrifies Anna, and she storms out. Liam goes with her. He's like horrified too, I guess. And that's the thing about Liam, is he also despises his father, and he has also distanced himself from the family and from the business. But because this book takes so seriously how evil this family is and the absurd disparity between their opulent lifestyle and the way that the main character Anna has to like struggle to pay her bills and to try to pay her dad's medical bills, because you're in that universe, part of you still wants to judge him a little bit for being involved at all. But the co-authors, I think, are aware of that, so they do put him in this catch-22 scenario where if he walks away from the family entirely and like lets go of his inheritance, that does also mean screwing over all of his siblings. The thing is, I am so thoroughly disgusted by the family in the end that I'm like, screw the siblings. See if I care. I don't care. So when he's faced with this decision between rejoining the family, rejoining the business, and like screwing everybody over, I was excited because I kind of thought we were heading in the screwing everybody over direction. And yes, he technically does make the decision not to go back to the business and like screw everyone over. I just don't love that neither he nor anybody else really has to face the consequences that were laid out for him. Like, with very little time to spare left in the novel, after he makes this monumental decision, all of the supposed consequences he might face for that just fall through conveniently. His dad's leverage and blackmail doesn't pan out, and the dad himself goes to prison. So the family and the business do have to damage control a little. They might take little financial hits, but they all stay rich. Liam stays rich. He stays involved with the company, but now that his dad is gone, it's just like a good company. I just think this book had an opportunity to be very cutthroat in its theming, and it ended up being less about like money corrupting everything and how having that much wealth is inherently evil. The message ended up being more so that money is fine if the good people have it, and it's fine now because that one guy is gone. So I'm sort of going back and forth between 3 and 4 stars for that reason. I can't be that mad at it because I think what I expected from it was a little unrealistic on my part, because the alternative to the ending we got would be an ending where Liam like truly lost everything and was accused of all of the sexual harassment that his father did. I guess I just wish all of those elements were separated somehow, because like I don't want his character to be assassinated, but I do want to see him start from 0. Right now, I have given it 4 stars. I think I like it, and I had fun reading it. And even though I have very much fallen behind on the blind ranking thing, I figure with only 2 left to go, I'll just update it with the 3 new books we have. The obvious one to me is that Just for the Summer is going second here. I have to hold it towards me. I tried to write it towards you and it was horrible. But know that this is actually a debate. Like, I don't know what I would put first, Funny Story or Just for the Summer, but this is the slot I have open. I feel pretty comfortable putting This Summer Will Be Different right here above Wild Love. Well, I'm out of space. This Summer Will Be Diff. Diff. Anyway, what's the other one again? Oh, The Paradise Problem. That's interesting. That's interesting. I'm going to put it below Play Along. And again, I sort of feel like this is a debate. When I get to rank these on their own terms without this half-blind thing going on, I don't know whether I would place Play Along or The Paradise Problem first, but I will say the tiers are working out. It's shaping up. Let's talk Leather and Lark. So I still haven't listened to that much of it. I think I'm about a quarter of the way in, but it is just aggressively not my vibe. That's the problem with making a video like this, where I am reading books that I wouldn't have picked up otherwise, is that I'm just forced to review something that was never gonna work for me. And I don't know what somebody who is generally into dark romance would think of it, but maybe it would be more their speed. I'm having a terrible time. I don't even want to come off like some sort of goody two-shoes when it comes to romance, because if I'm honest, I'm not even particularly excited to get into this cinnamon book either. Like, maybe I'll really like it. We haven't gotten there yet, but both sides of this coin just don't appeal to me that much, the super wholesome and the super dark. Maybe because either way in my mind it's a little forced. I also wish that dark romance as a subgenre took more so after like gothic romance, because that's what I could get into. I could get into stuff that is supposed to be a little bit based in horror, like a bit eerie and scary. I guess I can't speak about dark romance as a subgenre that authoritatively because I haven't read very much of it at all. But imagining that I was somebody seeking it out, I don't think leather and lark is what I'd be looking for at all. Why? Because it is way too silly and goofy. Why are we calling it dark romance when it's a silly, goofy comedy? I am having the exact same issue I had with Bride, and Bride, as far as I know, didn't sell itself as a dark romance. It sold itself as a paranormal, supernatural romance. And those, I guess, like, could be lighter in tone. I just didn't expect that. In this case, I expected something like dark and dreary and ooh and ah. And it's so Bride-like. I have to believe that the people who watch my videos are like-minded people. And if you are similar to me, I hope that I can convey to you why this book annoys me so much just by saying that in the opening scene, the main character for Halloween is dressed as Harley Quinn. So she's like murdering someone, specifically her ex-boyfriend, and she's like giggling about it, having a fun time. And like, mind you, the whole time she's dressed as Harley Quinn. It's like, what in the fanfiction is this? This is so annoying. I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be mean. I feel like it's mean specifically because I shouldn't be reading a book that I don't want to read and that I knew I wasn't gonna like. I guess I'm saying I would like to be able to review this book like on its own terms for what it is, and I feel more so like I'm attacking what it is from the outside, but I'm struggling so much not to because every second of listening to this story is torture for me because she doesn't take her job as a serial killer very seriously. She dances around and tells little jokes, and what I need is for her to get real and get down to business. Whatever, here's the plot so far. Like I said, when we first meet her, she is either blowing up or drowning her ex-predator boyfriend. But she's from like a rich criminal family, so she calls up her dad and says, hey, I need a cleanup on the side of the road. I killed somebody. So then Lachlan, as a part of his job or situation or whatever, is hired to be part of the cleanup committee. So he doesn't like how cavalier she is about this whole scenario because he doesn't know that she sought this guy out to attack. He doesn't know that she killed him on purpose for being a predator. He thinks that this girl like got in a hit and run and called her dad up for help to get out of it and doesn't even feel remorseful. So yada yada, they hate each other. Years later, her best friend and his brother, who I believe to have been the leads of the previous book in this series, they get married. So these two reunite, and before they realize that they know each other because they had been in Halloween costumes at the time, they start like making out, and then like he says something in a tone of voice that like jogs her memory, and they realize that they are those people, and they're like, no, I don't like you. Then they kill some more people, and eventually Lark stumbles upon a conversation between her father and mother about some attacks going on in the business. And because they know that when Lachlan went to clean up Lark's crime scene, they didn't get along, and that got him in trouble at work, they speculate that he's the one attacking their business or their clients or their family or somebody. And I guess her family doesn't do like checks and balances, so their plan is just to kill him and only go to the next option if the problem doesn't go away. But she doesn't want them to kill him because she loves her best friend, and her best friend is married to his brother, so that would be like a problem, I guess. But her criminal mastermind family is very serious about love and romance and marriage. So she goes to Lachlan to say, let's get married to save your life and to save like
your brother's life because he's probably the one they would suspect after you.
And I've just left off at their wedding, I think. That's the setup. Another fake dating marriage book. There was a random chapter from a villain's perspective, and I don't know who that was yet, but it's somebody who wants to kill basically everyone. So I imagine he'll kidnap somebody and they'll kill a bunch of people. Maybe they'll kill some people together, but I don't like that. I don't want to read this book anymore. That's the update. Another thing, actually, I want you to listen to a little something about this audiobook that is annoying me deeply, and that is that they're inserting laughs when the characters like tell jokes. So that's part of what makes her silly, goofy attitude during the murder so annoying to me, is it will cut to her like giggling, this maniacal laugh that is so obnoxious. And the scene I have pulled up right now is the one where the leads are flirting because they have reunited, but they don't realize that they know each other yet.
I mean, not really just corsets and tulle. Also wigs.
No. Something else that came to mind after I stopped recording is that I am not buying Lachlan as a super serious contract killer, specifically because his narration, when we get to his point of view, is so romantic and so written by a woman. So like, he meets Lark and he starts thinking to himself about how her essence lights up the room, and like, you can't fool me. That is not a dangerous man. That is a fake man, an imaginary man. Goodbye for real. I don't want to read anymore. I want to watch The Traitors. You know what I wish I was listening to on my walk from my first bus stop to my next one? Not Leather and Lark. And at this point, I really don't think it's because it's executed poorly, as much as I just hate what it is. But I'm so sick of it. I'm listening at 3 times speed now, and I can still understand it perfectly. I almost wish I couldn't. And the main thing is still just that it's trying to be like cutesy and funny, and I don't get how that pairs with their whole murderous thing. She just keeps saying all of these trendy, normal, like bantery things that feel out of place here. So like, for example, you know what she just said? She just said OMFG. OMFG? You are a serial killer. You can't say things like that. I don't know why that's how I feel, but it is. Anyway, that's still my thoughts. TTYL. I'm allowed to say abbreviations like that because I'm not a serial killer. Okay, now I'm walking the dog again. I don't know what to tell you. All I do is walk. But Lachlan just like dropped Lark off at an insomnia sleep retreat and handed her like a pamphlet about all the different kinds of therapy she can do. Something I've noticed as I've been doing this is that what is popular in romance right now is like well-adjusted men. Like half of these male leads openly go to therapy because it's such a thing with a lot of popular romance that the male leads are like toxic in one way or another. And it's ultimately so good that we have moved past that as a society, but now I don't understand why we're also doing that in a dark romance. Because I thought the whole point of that subgenre was like relishing in that admittedly unhealthy behavior. If Lachlan is just gonna be a super sweet normal guy, then like what are we doing here? Why am I reading about him as a contract killer? Why isn't he in finance? But also, like, I guess I have to leave room for this book to be what it wants to be, and I need to stop having genre expectations of a genre that I don't even frequent. So it's been a minute since I've filmed anything because tragedy has struck. For one thing, I think having to read Lachlan and Lark has been a tragedy, and I am struggling very much to get through it. For another, I am sick. I don't know if I look or sound that sick, but trust, I feel sick. And that has been the number one downside of working at an elementary school. Like, there are so many good things about it. I have an awesome schedule where I'm off at 2. I have some awesome students who I get to watch learn and grow, but they don't cover their mouths. They don't wash their hands. And the third tragedy is that I was watching The Traitors on my laptop on Thursday night, and I rolled out of bed to go to the bathroom and knocked the laptop off my bed onto the floor. The laptop has been broken. But now that I work in education, I do get the education discount. So I'm just recycling it and downgrading to an Air. But I have custom ordered the Air to have extra storage because video editing takes so much storage. And I won't get it for like 2 weeks. So I guess actually it's a good time to read a book. I'll probably read the cinnamon one physically because I have all the time in the world to like not be on electronics. But I really wanted to get started editing this video. I suppose it's time I reconnect with nature. And this is also coalescing with like TikTok maybe shutting down. So like, what am I gonna do? Touch grass? It's not grassy. It's snowy. But yeah, I mean, I guess I have a lot of time now, so I'll probably take it slow reading the cinnamon book. I'll probably download the ebook. I have been a little bit scared away from audiobooks for a second by Lachlan and Lark because this audiobook has those giggles, those little giggles I showed you. They're all over the place. Every time it says character laughed, they go, and I can't stand it. But you know what else is happening now that I've gotten to the part where they're having sex scenes is that there's like moaning in this book. And at like what point are we stretching the bounds of the medium too much? So that's the update. Maybe it'll be a while until you hear from me, because now I feel emboldened to take a break from reading all of these books. I was totally gonna put on makeup to film right now because this is a special installment. This will be our final update, but I messed up my eyeliner so many times that it started burning, meaning you're getting a barefaced conclusion today. So yes, that does mean that since we last spoke, my journey with Lachlan and Lark ended, and just yesterday I read all of The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, which was the last novel I had to get through. My laptopless week didn't actually end up being that productive because my new one, which is this pretty starlight color that I'm very much enjoying, my new one came early, so I was anticipating a whole nother week to have basically nothing to do but read, meaning I sort of put off getting through these last two and then surprise got this laptop on Friday, and this weekend committed to finishing this project. Though I must admit, I did cut a corner. Like, the reason that I said my journey with Lachlan and Lark ended instead of that I finished it is because I did DNF. I did let that one go. I still marked it as complete on Goodreads. I still gave it a rating, and generally I would say I'm against that because I like to be an informed hater and I do like to see things through before I decide about them. I was just so close. Like, there's a difference between giving up halfway through and saying you've read something and where I was at, where according to the Books app I was 90% in, and based on the speed at which I was listening to it, I had 30 minutes left. That's close enough. Like, I have fully experienced Lachlan and Lark. I did skip ahead to the epilogue, so they ended up together. Like, there was some guy whose perspective would sometimes be looped in wherein he was like stalking the leads and talking about how he wanted to kill everyone, and I just imagined that he like attacked and then they like survived and they're in love. So, you know, I got it. I got it. I do feel a little bit guilty about it. Like, if people weren't already going to comment that the title of this video is a lie based on the fact that I was listening to audiobooks rather than reading myself, then I will certainly get comments now that are like, you didn't even read the top 10 voted books because there's one that you gave up on. And you know what? If you have to believe that of me, I can live with that because you can't make me finish Lachlan and Lark. Funny story, actually, as I was listening to Lachlan and Lark, my mom started listening to a book she was gifted for Christmas called Lock and Key. She also briefed me on the premise of that book, which is that the male lead transforms into the Loch Ness Monster. So that sounds hilarious and I kind of want to check it out. The point is that one day I got into the car and started hearing a character by the name of Lachlan with an accent narrating throughout the speakers of the car. So I was like, oh, sorry, my book must have started playing, and I paused it because I do not need my mom hearing any of what goes on in Lachlan and Lark. And then she said, you're listening to that too? Anyway, it was a funny misunderstanding. The male lead in Lock and Key is also named Lachlan. But even though I've made it quite clear that I hated Lachlan and Lark, I don't feel like I can say it was poorly executed. Like, I don't know what fans of dark romance are looking for in it. I do feel like if I were into dark romance, I wouldn't be looking for what Lachlan and Lark is. I feel like I would want something grittier with like more damaged characters and something like more interesting, something darker in tone and not just in subject matter. But then, like, evidently this book does have a fan base and it comes from a series with a fan base. So I just don't feel like I can say this book didn't accomplish what it set out to accomplish. What I know is that I am not interested in what it wanted to accomplish. I wouldn't have read it. I have set out this task for myself to read these books, so I bought the audiobook and I listened to it and I had a terrible time. I went to the yogurt shop, didn't get the yogurt that I wanted, and had a hard time the rest of the weekend. It's gonna go down here. I might have to look up how to spell it. Actually, let me try because I bet I know. I'm just so reliant on looking up how to spell things, even when I probably know. I like to be certain. But I guess this is another value of actually reading yourself, is that you would likely know how to spell the main character's name. This is how I think it's spelled. Oh no, I've discovered something even worse than I could have imagined. Like, first of all, I did spell his name wrong because it's not an O, it's an A. Lachlan. But that's irrelevant because it's not called Lachlan and Lark. I guess once I knew that the male lead's name was Lachlan and remembered that the title ended with and Lark, knowing that the female lead's name was Lark, I guess I edited the title in my head when it is in fact Leather and Lark, which I believe I had said correctly at some point in this video. But anyway, I'm sorry if you're offended. I'm sorry if you like it, but it's just a no-brainer for me. Like, even Bride is something I got some enjoyment out of. There were like moments in it that I liked and characters that I was endeared to, like the little sister character. Every moment of Leather and Lark was torture for me, and in an entirely different way than I expected. Because like, I'm somebody who likes to read about healthy, well-adjusted characters, and that's why I'm not into dark romance. My ideal version of a contemporary romance novel is one that has some societal commentary, some social commentary mixed with just really good, realistic character work with really like mundane problems that are just written in a way that really elevates them. That's what I like about some of these top rankers. So when I saw that something that was being advertised as a dark romance was on this list of books I had to read, my main fear was that I would just find it really disturbing. Rest assured, I was not disturbed. It read very much like your average, like, kooky, humorous rom-com novel, but like for some reason the characters were killers. Like, it just did not make any sense to me, and I'm realizing a new preference that I have because it's sort of the same problem I had with Bride. You could even say I had this issue with Wild Love because I didn't understand why we were doing a billionaire romance without the trappings of billionaire romance. I don't understand why you would do like a supernatural romance if you're just gonna write it how you would write a workplace romance. I don't understand why we're doing a dark romance where all of the characters are going to therapy. Maybe I'm just a stickler for genre conventions, but I'm not even super in the know on what the genre conventions of dark romance are. I think for me, it's much more about the fact that tone matters a lot to me and that intentionality matters a lot to me. I want to feel like you chose the premise of your book, you chose the genre of your book, you chose the character traits and jobs in the book for reasons that like come together. And that's not how I feel about these bottom three. What do we have above them? At least This Summer Will Be Different was more so just boring to me. I do think it was like consistent. I think it knew what it wanted to be and strived towards that and, you know, did okay. And that's just what I'll say about Leather, not Lachlan, and Lark, which only leaves one slot left for the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, which is going to take a second to write. I might not even hold it out towards you. I just wrote cinnamon. And looking at this somewhat blind ranking, I want to say it's pretty accurate. So obviously, in terms of what you'd expect from the vibe, something called the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore is going to be the polar opposite of a Leather and Lark. If you'll recall, I think that was part of the motivation behind leaving those two for last. It is about Hazel, which is a name I like, who is about to turn 30 and works in a bookstore which sells cinnamon rolls on Saturdays. It is about her having a quarter life crisis where she feels she's been too stagnant and not really living her 20s, and then finding a secret message in the bookstore in the form of like a highlighted passage that said something like, "If you want adventure, I'll show you adventure." It was like in a pirate romance. And then she keeps getting these messages, she calls them clues, that sort of dictate the next adventure she will go on. Here's like, can I just say the first problem I had with it? I do not think that me and this book have the same definition of adventure. I mean, I guess theoretically an adventure could be anything, but the way she talks about it, it seems very clear what an adventure should be, because she is talking explicitly about the fact that she missed out on her 20s. She never had a one-night stand. She never like partied too hard, never did any of this like wild, crazy stuff. So that's sort of what I would assume she'd want to do. Actually, I pulled up a passage for an entirely different point I wanted to make, but it will serve as evidence for what I'm talking about right now. An adventure. I want to follow the clues, assuming there will be more, and I want to just, I don't know, I want to be reckless. I've spent my whole life being safe, and now I want adventure, excitement. I want a good story to tell over drinks. So like, even if this doesn't mean that she goes out and gets arrested or does anything like super insane, I think it at least means that she like camps out at a concert or like does anything remotely adventurous. But the types of clues that she gets are so in line with the lifestyle she already leads of like wholesome fun. One of the passages that's highlighted is about vanilla milkshakes. So she goes to her local grocery store and gets ice cream and milk and makes milkshakes at home. One of the passages highlighted is about riding a Ferris wheel, or maybe it's just about going to the carnival and the Ferris wheel becomes part of it. I don't remember exactly. And to be fair, she has a fear of heights, so this is a little bit closer to something that could be considered an adventure, but still, what this results in is her going to a state fair or carnival or whatever it was and riding a Ferris wheel. This is not reckless making up for your lost 20s behavior. You need to hit the club. You need to do something more adventurous for this whole book to even make sense, but whatever. That's not a huge deal. It's just something that bothered me. The romantic premise is basically that she enlists the help of a local guy to help her adventure because he's known to be like adventurous. His name is Noah. He's like a high school dropout fisherman who has a reputation for hooking up with everyone. Much like, if not all, then the vast majority of these books, it is from dual perspectives, so you get to hear from both of them, but not in first person. It's third person limited, so it goes back and forth between their headspaces, but always still with that distance. And, you know, it was nice to have a different form of perspective. I think first person works often for romance, but it's cool to see it mixed up. I do think that it made it feel more storybooky, which also suits a more, you know, wholesome vibe. Its writing style is also very, I would say, simplistic, not necessarily as an insult, and that's actually what I originally brought up this passage for. Like, when you hear that dialogue, it's not very subtextual. She's saying, here is literally what I want, an adventure. I want to do this. Like, she's the Disney princess, basically. And that's fine. I'm just establishing that that's the vibe of this book. It's very easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And to be fair, I think that's pretty much what you want if you're picking up a book called the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, part of a series called the Dream Harbor series. The town is called Dream Harbor. The series is anthological, but all of the romances take place in the town. So obviously that's a trend in this top 10. I would say reading this one, I had a uniquely difficult time identifying like who the previous leads were and who future leads might be. Like, when I was listening to Play Along, for example, it just felt so obvious that his brother, the male lead's brother, had been a lead. And it also felt like it didn't expect me to already know the characters I was reading about, even though somebody who had read those previous books might. So it still took the time to really introduce me to all of the characters in the universe. I feel like the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore threw me into Dream Harbor and started bringing up names and stuff that I'd never heard of. A good example of that would be the fact that one of Hazel's dads is the mayor of Dream Harbor, and he is known to be, what's the word, clairvoyant. So at like town hall meetings, he'll be like, I had a dream. And maybe that's why it's called Dream Harbor. That is apparently something going on that I didn't realize until really deep into the book. I was like, her dad's the mayor? Like, who said that? Like, when did we clarify that? And he's clairvoyant? Okay. I didn't know this. I don't know where I am. Who are these people? And it's the same thing with like this massive group of friends that both of the leads come from. It's just like, I don't know these people. You keep talking about them like I know who they are. I need you to say Jessica, my best friend, and Tommy, my next door neighbor. Maybe it like did sometimes and I just wasn't paying good enough attention. But I swear I came out of this book knowing two people, Hazel and Noah, and everybody else was like, okay, maybe I think that girl's in the book club. But like overall, the vibes of Dream Harbor are that every character owns a small quaint business and they all have silly little names with like flavors or food in them. Like, this is why, even though broadly, if the two options are like wholesome romance or dark romance, I would say I'm more on the wholesome side. I don't like actively go seeking out books that are like fuzzy because I need a little edge. Like, I need it to be normal. I don't know why we have to go to these two extremes. And this would be also why I've never gravitated towards the grumpy and sunshine trope, because then it's like you're not even dealing with characters, you're dealing with like archetypes of optimism and pessimism. Why does that sound so wrong to me? Whatever, it was ultimately fine. I did have fun while I was reading it. I thought it was sweet while I was reading it. The issue, I think, is a lack of sticking power. Like, I am coming to you live the day after I read this book, and I just can't put myself back in the place where I was invested in it. And I know that that's something that's possible for me, because actually, here's a confession. On one of my bus rides home this week, when I could have finished Leather and Lark, I re-listened to the beginning of Just for the Summer because I wanted to be back there with those people who I love so much. This book definitely does not have that kind of power. I just don't see myself ever thinking about it again. I think I did give it 3 over 2 stars on Goodreads though. And I suppose that's all the books. This feels kind of anticlimactic, but I did show you my rankings. I do feel happy to have done this. It was nice to catch up with what's going on in the genre. Unfortunately, I still feel somewhat out of the loop just based on the fact that what is in right now is romantasy, which has its own whole section. What I do feel I have learned is what the trends are in contemporary romance, because even though I knew this existed somewhat, I did not realize that we are in an era of like anthological romance series where you are choosing a town or like a sports team or like a set of siblings or like a friend group to do romances for all of them. And I will stress, as I have said, that I like that and I think that is fun. It's just like shocking to me, like the percentage of these that fit that bill, whatever happened to a one-off. What I would like to know is how you guys liked this video format. I haven't edited it yet, and I do think a lot of what this video is going to be will be determined in the edit, so I'm not sure how I feel yet, but I have enjoyed this. I would like it if you guys liked this, but if you hate it, we'll figure something else out. I kind of like doing unscripted videos because I feel I'm funnier and less rigid in them. I kind of don't like them because I don't feel like I get my points across as well. That's where I'm at. Let me know what you think of these 10 books if you've read them. Let me know if you love any of these books that I hated, what your defense of them is.